The great chamber of the Galactic Senate stretched across what had once been the crater of an ancient moon, its crystalline dome reaching toward the stars like a monument to civilization itself. Within its vast expanse, representatives from 800 worlds gathered in their designated sections, each species claiming their rightful place in the hierarchy of cosmic importance. The Zephyrians occupied the highest tier, their translucent forms shimmering with an inner light that spoke of their mastery over energy manipulation. Below them sat the Corvani Empire, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming under the chamber's artificial suns, while the collective consciousness of the ethereal minds floated in their specialized atmospheric pods. Every seat held beings who had conquered star systems, bent the laws of physics to their will, or achieved technological marvels that defied comprehension. And then there were the humans. They sat in the lowest section of the chamber, a small delegation of 12 individuals in simple dark suits that looked almost primitive compared to the biomechanical armor, energy fields, and quantum phase clothing worn by their fellow senators. Ambassador Elena Vasquez straightened her jacket as she felt the familiar weight of 1,000 alien gazes upon her delegation, most filled with barely concealed amusement. "The chair recognizes the human delegation," announced Prime Chancellor Thexvar, his voice carrying the subtle harmonic frequencies that marked him as one of the Zephyrian elite. Even in his tone, Elena could detect the faint note of condescension that had become as familiar as breathing during humanity's 3-year membership in the Senate. Elena stood, her movement causing a ripple of what could only be described as suppressed laughter through several sections of the chamber. She had grown accustomed to it. The way the Corvani made their clicking sounds that served as chuckles, how the ethereal minds pulsed with colors that their translators interpreted as mirth, and the harmonic fluctuations from dozens of other species that all conveyed the same message. Humans were the cosmic joke of the galaxy. "Honored Chancellor and esteemed colleagues," Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Humanity wishes to address the proposed Kepler Station Defense Initiative." The Kepler Station sat at the crossroads of 7 major hyperspace lanes, a massive structure that served as both a trading hub and a strategic choke point for nearly 40% of galactic commerce. The Defense Initiative proposed a joint military installation that would protect this vital nexus from the increasing raids by the Void Wraiths, a nomadic faction that had been growing bolder in their attacks on civilian shipping. "The floor recognizes Ambassador Vasquez," Chancellor Thexvar replied, though his tone suggested he was merely following protocol rather than showing any genuine interest in what humanity might contribute to such an important discussion. Elena activated her delegation's holographic display, showing detailed tactical analyses, resource allocation charts, and proposed defensive configurations that her team had spent months preparing. "Humanity offers to contribute our full industrial capacity to this project. Our shipyards in the Sol system can produce the necessary defensive platforms at 30% below current galactic market rates, with delivery timelines that exceed all current projections." The silence that followed was not one of consideration, but of disbelief. Then came the sounds, the Corvani clicking, the harmonic ripples from the Zephyrians, the color flashes from the ethereal minds. It built into what could only be called a wave of cosmic laughter. Senator Crixtal of the Andromedans was the first to speak, his voice amplified by the bioacoustic chambers that surrounded his aquatic environment. "With respect to our human colleagues, perhaps they misunderstand the scope of this undertaking. We are discussing the defense of Kepler Station, a structure that processes the economic output of entire star systems. This is not a matter for smaller civilizations." The laughter grew louder. Elena felt her jaw tighten, but her expression remained composed. Behind her, she could sense the tension radiating from her fellow delegates, particularly from General Harrison, whose military background made diplomatic restraint a constant challenge. "Perhaps," interjected Councillor Vexera of the Hegemony, her serpentine form coiling with what passed for amusement among her species, "our human friends could contribute in ways more suited to their current capabilities. Surely their primitive manufacturing could produce some useful components. Simple alloys, perhaps? Basic electronics." The mockery was no longer subtle. Elena watched as species after species joined in what had become a familiar ritual, the systematic dismissal of human capabilities. They spoke of humanity's quaint chemical rockets, their amusing attempts at quantum computing, their endearing belief that they belonged among the great powers of the galaxy. The humans still use projectile weapons, announced Senator Gorth of the Titan Confederacy, his massive form causing tremors in the chamber floor as he shifted with laughter. Metal bullets fired by chemical explosions. How wonderfully primitive. And they're faster than light travel, added another voice from the crystalline collective. They still require months to traverse distances we cross in hours. It's almost charming how they compensate for their limitations with such enthusiasm. Elena remained standing throughout the performance, her hands clasped behind her back, her face a mask of diplomatic neutrality. She had endured this before, in fact, endured it at every major Senate gathering for 3 years. The pattern was always the same. Humanity would propose a contribution, offer their services, attempt to participate as equals in galactic affairs, and the Senate would respond with laughter. The laughter of beings who could manipulate matter at the molecular level, who had unlocked the secrets of consciousness transfer, who commanded fleets that could reshape solar systems. The laughter of civilizations that measured their histories in millions of years while humanity had barely reached the stars a century ago. "I believe," said Chancellor Thexvar, his harmonic voice cutting through the din, "that we have heard enough on this matter. The defense initiative will proceed under the guidance of the primary powers. Perhaps humanity can contribute in some auxiliary capacity." More laughter. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. Not anger, not humiliation, but something far more dangerous, clarity. "If I may," she said, her voice cutting through the chamber with surprising authority. The laughter died down, more from curiosity than respect. "Humanity appreciates the Senate's consideration of our proposal." She gestured to her team, who began shutting down their holographic displays and gathering their materials. "However, I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of this discussion." Chancellor Thexvar's light form flickered with what might have been confusion. "I'm afraid I don't follow, Ambassador." Elena closed the last of her delegation's cases with a decisive snap that echoed through the suddenly quiet chamber. "You see, Honored Chancellor, we came here today under the assumption that this was a negotiation between allies, a discussion among equals about mutual defense and shared responsibilities." She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as the various alien physiologies allowed. "But I realize now that we were mistaken. This isn't a discussion. This is a performance. And humanity has no interest in being the entertainment." The silence that followed was different from before, charged with uncertainty and the first hints of unease. "I'm afraid I still don't understand," the Chancellor said, though his harmonic frequency had shifted to something more cautious. Elena smiled then, but it was not the diplomatic smile she had worn for 3 years of mockery. It was something else entirely. "Of course you don't. That's exactly the point." She turned to her delegation. "We're leaving." "Ambassador," Senator Crixtal interjected, his aquatic chamber bubbling with agitation. "Surely you don't mean to withdraw from the defense initiative discussions over a simple misunderstanding?" Elena paused at the edge of her delegation's section, her hand resting on the railing that separated the human area from the central aisle. "Withdraw? Oh no, Senator. We're not withdrawing from anything." Her smile widened, and for the first time since humanity had joined the Galactic Senate, the laughter stopped completely. "We're walking away from everything." The message reached every human colony, outpost, and vessel within 72 hours. It was simple, direct, and unlike anything the galaxy had seen from humanity before. All human personnel and assets are to cease interaction with Galactic Senate members and territories immediately. No exceptions. No explanations. Effective now. Admiral Sarah Chun read the directive for the 3rd time as her command ship, the U.S. Determination, hung in space near the Proxima Relay Station. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, but she could feel the tension in the air. Every officer knew what this meant, even if they didn't fully understand why. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Morrison from the communications station, "we're receiving multiple hails from Senate vessels requesting clarification of our new directives." Chun didn't look up from her displays. Standard response, Lieutenant. Humanity is reorganizing its priorities. All current agreements and negotiations are suspended pending internal review. Ma'am, that's the Corvani battle cruiser Esikithar requesting permission to dock for scheduled maintenance. They've used our facilities for the past 18 months. Denied. The Zephyrian science vessel, wanting to continue their joint research project with our xenobiology team? Suspended. The ethereal collective transport carrying humanitarian supplies to the Outer Rim colonies? Chen finally looked up, her expression unreadable. They'll have to find another route. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated itself. Human merchant vessels began changing their routes, avoiding systems with significant Senate presence. Research stations closed their doors to alien scientists. Diplomatic channels went silent. Trade agreements were quietly suspended. Defense contracts were allowed to expire without renewal. It wasn't dramatic. There were no angry declarations, no threats, no demands. Humanity simply stopped participating. On Kepler Station itself, the effects became apparent within the first week. The massive trading hub relied on a complex web of services, supplies, and logistics that had grown over decades. Humanity had been a small but consistent part of that web. Nothing flashy, nothing that drew attention, but steady and reliable. Station Administrator Kexlon, a being whose crystalline form reflected the lights of the command center in prismatic arrays, stared at the growing list of complications on his displays. The humans had operated 17% of the station's maintenance contracts. Not the glamorous work that other species competed for, but the grinding, daily necessities that kept a structure housing 12 million beings functioning. Status report, Kexlon commanded, his voice resonating through the command center's acoustic chambers. His chief of operations, a Corvani named Thekmar, clicked his mandibles in frustration. The human waste processing crews haven't reported for duty in 5 days. The backup systems are operating at maximum capacity, but they're not designed for long-term use. And the alternative providers? The Andromedans can provide waste management services, but their bioprocessors require a complete overhaul of our current systems. Estimated cost, 40 million credits. Timeline, 6 months. Kexlon's crystalline form dimmed slightly. What about the atmospheric regulators? Human crews maintain the nitrogen-oxygen mixture for the 47 species that require those specific atmospheric conditions. The Zephyrian energy shapers can replicate the process, but their equipment produces harmonic resonances that interfere with 17 different species' biorhythms. Solutions: harmonic dampening fields. Cost: 60 million credits. Timeline: for months. Or we could relocate those 17 species to other sections of the station. The list continued. Food service for 30 different dietary requirements. The humans had run the only kitchens capable of preparing safe meals for such a diverse range of biologies. Cargo handling for awkward or dangerous materials. Human flexibility and problem-solving abilities had made them the go-to choice for difficult shipments. Basic manufacturing of spare parts, not exotic technology, but the simple, reliable components that every complex system needed to function. In each case, alternatives existed. The galaxy was full of species with advanced technology and impressive capabilities. But those alternatives were expensive, time-consuming to implement, and often came with complications that the simple, straightforward human solutions had avoided. Chancellor Thexvar called an emergency session of the Senate Security Committee 3 weeks after humanity's withdrawal. The Great Chamber felt different now, though none of the remaining members could quite articulate why. Perhaps it was the empty section where the human delegation had once sat. Or perhaps it was the growing awareness that their cosmic joke had suddenly stopped being funny. The situation is becoming untenable, reported Senator Crixtow, his aquatic environment bubbling with agitation. Kepler Station is requesting emergency funding for infrastructure upgrades. Several border worlds are experiencing supply shortages. The Void Wraith raids have increased by 40% in sectors previously patrolled by human vessels. Surely, interjected Councillor Vexera, though her usual serpentine confidence seemed muted, these are temporary inconveniences. We simply need time to adjust our logistics. Temporary. Admiral Gextar of the Titan Confederacy leaned forward, his massive form causing structural stress alerts to flicker briefly on the chamber's safety systems. My fleets are now required to cover patrol routes that the humans previously handled. Their ships were slower, yes, but they maintained a presence in 17 sectors that we had overlooked as strategically insignificant. Chancellor Thexvar's harmonic frequencies shifted to a lower, more troubled register. What exactly are you saying, Admiral? I'm saying that those insignificant sectors contained 43 trade routes, 12 mining operations, and 37 worlds with populations exceeding 1 billion. The humans kept those areas stable and secure with a fraction of the resources that my fleets would require for the same coverage. The chamber fell silent as the implications settled in. The humans hadn't just walked away from the Senate. They had walked away from countless small tasks, minor responsibilities, and unglamorous duties that no one else had wanted to handle. Perhaps, suggested Senator Quindar of the Hegemony, we should send a diplomatic mission to Earth. Surely this is all a misunderstanding that can be resolved with proper negotiation. We tried, admitted Chancellor Thexvar, his harmonic shame audible to anyone familiar with Zephyrian emotional frequencies. Ambassador HFY Extel departed for Earth 2 weeks ago. The human authorities were perfectly polite. They provided full diplomatic courtesy, answered all questions with complete transparency, and made it absolutely clear that humanity has no interest in rejoining galactic society at this time. No interest. Counselor Vexera's serpentine form coiled with confusion. But surely they understand the benefits of Senate membership, the trade opportunities, the technological exchanges, the protection we provide. Chancellor Thexvar's light form flickered with what could only be interpreted as embarrassment. According to Ambassador HFY Extel's report, the humans expressed gratitude for the Senate's past guidance. They indicated that they had learned a great deal about their place in the galaxy, and were now prepared to pursue a path more suited to their capabilities. Which means what exactly? They're building something, Admiral Gextar rumbled, his voice carrying undertones that made several species shift uncomfortably in their seats. My intelligence networks have detected massive industrial expansion throughout human space. New shipyards, manufacturing centers, research facilities. Whatever they're doing it without us. The silence stretched longer this time, filled with the growing realization that the cosmic joke had somehow turned into something else entirely. The primitive humans, with their chemical rockets and projectile weapons, had simply walked away from a galaxy that offered them everything they could ever want. And somehow, in their absence, that galaxy was discovering just how much it had depended on the species it had spent 3 years mocking. In the empty section where humanity's delegation had once sat, dust motes danced in the artificial starlight, and the great chamber felt a little smaller, a little dimmer, and far less certain of its place in the cosmic order. The laughter had stopped completely. The distress signal came from the outer edge of the Kepler system, where the massive trade station hung in space like a dying star. Its usual brilliant arrays of lights had dimmed to emergency levels, and the constant stream of ships that normally surrounded it had dwindled to a desperate trickle. Captain Marcus Rodriguez of the merchant vessel Resilient Dawn received the transmission while his ship was 3 days out from the Sol system's outer shipping lanes. The message was brief, formal, and carried the unmistakable tone of beings who had exhausted all other options. Human vessel, this is Kepler Station Control requesting immediate assistance. We are experiencing critical system failures and have civilians trapped in damaged sections. Any aid you can provide would be greatly appreciated. Rodriguez read the message twice, then called up his communications officer. Send a reply. Tell them we'll be there in 18 hours. Sir, his first officer interjected. Command Directive 17 specifically states that we're to avoid all Senate territories and facilities. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Officer Chun, when did saving lives become a political decision? The Resilient Dawn wasn't a military vessel. It was a converted cargo hauler that Rodriguez and his crew had been using to transport supplies between the growing network of independent human colonies that had sprung up in the wake of humanity's withdrawal from the Senate. But, like every human ship built in the past 18 months, it carried capabilities that would have seemed impossible 3 years earlier. When Rodriguez's ship emerged from hyperspace near Kepler Station, the sight that greeted them was worse than they had expected. The massive structure was venting atmosphere from at least 6 major breaches. Its navigation lights flickered erratically, and debris fields suggested that several critical external systems had suffered catastrophic failures. Station control. This is Captain Rodriguez of the Resilient Dawn. Transmitting emergency protocols now. The response came immediately, tinged with relief and confusion. Captain Rodriguez, we weren't certain anyone would respond. Most of our emergency service contracts were with human crews, and since the withdrawal, save it for later, control. Right now, tell me what you need. What followed was a masterclass in human adaptability that the galaxy had somehow forgotten existed. Rodriguez's crew of 37 worked with the efficiency and coordination that left the station's observers speechless. They sealed atmospheric breaches using portable force field generators that human engineers had developed when they couldn't afford the exotic materials other species used. They rerouted power systems using modular components that could be reconfigured for dozens of different alien technologies. They evacuated trapped civilians using equipment that was simple, reliable, and utterly effective. How are they doing this? Station Administrator Kexlon asked his chief engineer as they watched the human crew work. Their tools are so basic. Engineer Rocktail S., whose insectoid form was better suited to the technical aspects of the crisis than his administrator's crystalline physiology, observed the humans through the station's internal sensors. Basic, yes, but look at how they adapt them. That cutting tool they're using to clear debris. It's nothing more than a focused plasma stream. Technology we perfected millennia ago. But they've modified it to work with 17 different power sources and configured the beam profile to cut through materials we didn't even think to test. And their coordination? No quantum-linked consciousness like the ethereals. No bioneural networking like the collective. They're using simple radio communications and hand signals, but they're operating like a single organism. As the hours passed, more human ships began arriving. Not military vessels, but merchants, cargo haulers, research ships, and colony transports. Each one carried equipment, supplies, or expertise that contributed to the rescue effort. And each one operated with the same quietly professional competence that had once been dismissed as primitive simplicity. By the time the crisis was over, 37,000 civilians had been safely evacuated, all critical systems had been stabilized, and Kepler Station was no longer in immediate danger of complete structural failure. The entire operation had taken less than 48 hours. Chancellor Thexvar arrived 3 days later aboard the Senate flagship Eternal Wisdom, accompanied by a full diplomatic escort and emergency aid supplies that were no longer needed. He found Captain Rodriguez in one of the station's repair bays, overseeing the final phase of atmospheric system restoration. Captain Rodriguez. The Chancellor's harmonic voice carried formal diplomatic courtesy, but underneath lay something that might have been humility. I am Chancellor Thexvar of the Galactic Senate. I wanted to personally thank you for your assistance in this crisis. Rodriguez looked up from the control panel he was calibrating, wiped his hands on a maintenance rag, and studied the shimmering energy being before him. Chancellor, I heard you were coming. I hope you will accept the gratitude of not just Kepler Station, but of the Senate itself. Your response to this emergency was exemplary. We did what needed doing. The simple statement hung in the air between them, carrying weight that Thexvar was only beginning to understand. Captain, if I may ask, your ships, your equipment, your capabilities, they seem far more advanced than what we observed during humanity's Senate membership. Rodriguez nodded toward a view screen showing the bustling activity of his crew as they completed their work. We've been busy. I don't understand. Sure you do, Chancellor. You told us exactly where we belonged in the galactic hierarchy. Bottom tier. Support services. Simple manufacturing. So we went home and did what humans do best. Which is, Rodriguez's smile contained no humor, but no anger either. Just a quiet confidence that Thexvar found somehow unsettling. We figured out how to do better with less. The Chancellor's harmonic frequencies shifted to confusion. I'm sorry. You've got energy manipulation that can reshape matter at the quantum level. Amazing technology. But You need specialized facilities, exotic materials, and massive infrastructure support to make it work. We built tools that can do 70% of the same job with components you can manufacture in any basic industrial facility. Rodriguez gestured to the repair work being completed around them. Your Corvani friends have bioengineering that can create living ships. Incredible stuff. But those ships need specific atmospheric conditions, particular nutrients, and careful biological maintenance. We built ships that can run on anything combustible and be repaired with a welding torch and spare parts. I still don't see the relevance. The Zephyrians can cross the galaxy in hours using quantum tunneling. We still take weeks with our primitive FTL drives. But our ships don't need exotic matter to fuel them. They don't require specialized navigation equipment that only one species in the galaxy knows how to build. And they don't stop working if you encounter an unexpected quantum field fluctuation. The pieces began clicking into place in Thexvar's consciousness. You've been developing alternatives. Simpler versions of our technologies. Not simpler. Better. More reliable. More practical. More human. Rodriguez finished with his calibration and started packing up his tools. See, here's what you never understood about humanity, Chancellor. We're not impressed by the most advanced solution. We're impressed by the solution that works when everything else fails. Captain, perhaps we should discuss humanity's return to the Senate. Clearly, we underestimated your contributions. I'm certain we can reach an arrangement that better reflects your true capabilities. Rodriguez paused in his packing, and when he looked at the Chancellor again, there was something in his expression that made the energy being's harmonics fluctuate with uncertainty. You know what the funny thing is, Chancellor? 3 years ago, we would have jumped at that offer. We wanted so badly to belong, to be accepted as equals. We would have done anything to earn your respect. And now we realize we never needed your respect. We needed your dismissal. Your mockery taught us that trying to impress you was a waste of time. So we stopped trying to be you and started being us. Rodriguez shouldered his equipment bag and headed for the bay exit. The galaxy is a big place, Chancellor. Plenty of room for different approaches to the same problems. You keep doing things your way. We'll keep doing things ours. But what about cooperation? Mutual benefit? The advantages of working together. Rodriguez paused at the doorway and looked back with that same quiet smile. When you figure out how to cooperate instead of condescend, let us know. Until then, we'll be out here doing what humans do best, which is making sure the universe keeps working one repair at a time. As Rodriguez and his crew departed, leaving Kepler Station fully functional and its inhabitants safe, Chancellor Thexvar remained in the repair bay, trying to process what had just occurred. Humanity hadn't returned to grovel for readmission to the Senate. They hadn't sought revenge for years of mockery. They had simply demonstrated, with quiet competence and unshakable confidence, that they no longer needed what the galaxy claimed to offer. In the months that followed, similar scenes played out across known space. Human ships appeared wherever there were problems too mundane for the great powers to bother with, too practical for advanced technology to solve efficiently, too real for theoretical solutions to address. They fixed things, helped people, and quietly built a reputation for being the ones who showed up when showing up mattered. The galaxy slowly began to understand that humanity had learned the most dangerous lesson possible. They had learned to succeed without permission, to thrive without approval, and to matter without recognition. And somewhere in the depths of space, in the growing network of human worlds and stations and ships, the species that had once been the cosmic joke was building something that would make the galaxy stop laughing forever. They were building a future where being human was enough.